The defendants of Angela Merkel's refugee politics usually have two narratives that conflict each other. One is that she is a thought-through, very conscious leader that has made a humanitarian decision for the better and would do it all over again. And the second is whenever you find a flaw with it, when you see the negative consequences, then she was also in a terrible rush that day and had to make a sole decision. And when she saw that emergency, where that that's repeated again and again, when she saw that emergency, she decided to relieve it with her humanitarian act. I have looked at the schedule of her day because her entire calendar is actually online, so you can look it up. And she had two appointments that day. One is she visited the Natural Science and Technology garage of the elementary school in the town of Buch in Bavaria. The second visit was the Center for Innovation and Startup at the Technical University Munich. Both visits to schools, once talking to little children and sometimes children a little bit older, because it's technically not just an elementary school, but also part of what Americans would describe as a high school. So she talked to children, and then afterwards she talked to students, so people in their early 20s, maybe late 10s. And none of these appointments were actually important at all, and I wonder really why she took them. There's a Facebook page, I think it's still up, I don't know, but I remember it at least. It says Kim Jong-un looking at things. I don't know whether you have seen that in the past, and there was a predecessor, a website that was called Kim Jong-il looking at things, and the whole point was to describe the communist leadership style, or the leadership style of countries that are not democracies, where the leader has a lot of spare time and doesn't really know what to do with the day. And in North Korea, they have to move around from one factory to the other and to look at what the workers have done, and you see all these photos where they stare at a chair here and at a basket there and say, oh, you've done that very nicely, congratulations for that wonderful communist product. And the likes of these pictures really came to my mind when I saw what kind of appointments she is picking, and you can go through her calendar. It's all over these kind of nonsense visits. She's basically on holiday 365 days a year. While Americans complain about Barack Obama or Donald Trump being on the golf course too often, Angela Merkel is visiting this or that school, is talking to some entrepreneurs, is then on a fair here and on an art gallery there. She's on holiday all the time, every time. And supposedly she had a very busy day on this 4th of September that is colloquially called the opening of the border, Grenzöffnung. And that's also a myth. Outside of she had no obligation to take these appointments in the first place and could have dealt with actual politics in that time. She was also not surprised in that. The entire decision to open the borders and to let so many immigrants into the country was made before that, and in quite a shocking fashion. The journalist Alexander Wendt, he is a conservative journalist who writes for the aggregate blog Ach Gut. He's co-running that with Henrik Broder. He had retrieved a letter from the then president of the agency that is responsible for immigration, the BAMF, and that was from Manfred Schmidt. He wrote already on the 20th of August 2015 to his staffers: the president has decided that from now on, no transfer, how would you call that, deportation, queries for Syrian asylum seekers will be issued anymore. The Dublin Agreement will effectively be suspended for Syrians. The de facto suspension of Dublin will not be communicated publicly. Again, the de facto suspension of Dublin will not be communicated publicly. I have to explain what Dublin is. Dublin is the agreement between the members of the Schengen area. That's almost all members of the EU who have decided that within their territory people can move freely. When people come from outside, they seek asylum in the country that they first hit the ground of. So if a boat comes to the shore of a British island, then they have the British authorities to ask whether they are granted asylum. If the boat arrives at Sicily, it's the Italians. If the boat arrives at Greece, you get the idea. So this is the Dublin Agreement. Every country has to take the refugees, or has to process the requests from potential immigrants on its own. And if a person makes it to a different country, and this is what this transaction transfer deportation is about, when a refugee makes a request to the authority in a different country, the Dublin Agreement demands that this refugee will be deported to the country where it first met the ground, so that this country will then process his or her request. And that was suspended that day. That is what we call the opening of the border, because that was read as an invitation of asylum seekers. Germany will take you, they will process it all on their own. It's no longer done by Italy, by the Greek and so on, who have experience with that, better experience with that, have a stricter law when it comes to it. Deciding that Dublin was ignored was the actual opening of the border. However, the general myth that is spread is that this happened through an order of Angela Merkel's and her Interior Minister Thomas de Maizière on the 4th of September 2015 and the following days, when in reality this internal writing that I've just read out was already on the 20th of August 2015. That is not all. That was just an informal general statement. On the next day, on the 21st of August 2015, there is a formal decree that specifies how this Dublin Agreement is suspended. The header reads, a procedure regulation for the suspension of the Dublin procedure for Syrian citizens. Okay, now I go through the document because it reflects a lot of what was going wrong at the time. It comes as a table. The left side is always the situation the desk clerk is in, and the right side is how he or she is to react to it. So on the left it says, the personal asylum application in the decentral offices or effective written application at the federal office concerning Dublin procedures are in front of you. So the decentral offices have a very clumsy translation for that. What they mean here is there is a federal office that is the authority of all the other offices offshore or off-site in other towns probably, so this is the application to the asylum can be made either through the main office or through dependencies. The right says how to react, and that is no initiation of the Dublin procedure. Questionnaire part 1 and 2 don't have to be asked and not sent. A national asylum case is to be opened. I have no idea what questionnaire part 1 or 2 is, but so you see already a part of the procedure is already put out of practice. It's not that the the authorities were overrun by all these asylum cases and suddenly lost control. No, it's the other way around. They first decided that they would stop asking questions before more people decided to try it with the German authorities, because they would not ask too many questions. Then the next row goes, the situation is Dublin procedure is started after application, but no transaction, transferal, a deportation query is made. The Dublin procedure is normally you have now to ask those member states that would normally be responsible for it, and then to ask for a transfer of that individual to that state. So the transaction has not yet been made, but the application has been started. So how are you to react as a desk clerk? Don't query deportation. Let the deadline for it 2 or 3 months pass by. Open a national asylum case afterwards. So here we have a deliberate intent to forego the deadlines. Again, authorities, departments of the state are asked to ignore deadlines or to wait deliberately until the deadlines are over, so they can no longer send the refugees to these other countries. Row 3, the situation on the left reads, Dublin procedure going, transaction query made, no answer back from the member state. So you have not yet an answer back, but you have already asked. So how are you to react? You wait for an answer of the member state, and then that's too funny. On, in brackets, fictional admission of the member state, cancellation of the Dublin procedure. This fictional is in brackets because you have some gaslighting going on. Obviously, when somebody admits they are prepared to take the asylum seeker, he does actually admit. Fictional is you have to kind of start some double think. Okay, it is admitted, but you somehow have to now think it wasn't. There is some obstacle between you and sending back that refugee. So in brackets you have a fictional admission, when of course what they mean is the other state is prepared to take back that asylum seeker. The next sentence is, send out a Syria questionnaire despite being still ahead of the deadline. Wait until deadline for the transaction is passed. Then make question within the national procedure. I have no idea exactly what that means. I don't know what the Syria questionnaire is and who is sent this thing. Probably the asylum seeker. I don't really know what that does. Does it help to lapse the deadline? For whatever reason, I think it's probably just to masquerade as something is still going on. The asylum seeker is feeling he is still in a process. So he sent some form and he is supposed to fill up. Please fill up the form, and you have all these, I think you have all these volunteers who help these refugees, and they go to the offices with them and do all this work, and they must have the feeling that they are doing something in the legal framework. So even though they know that an admission was already sent and they are lapsing the deadline anyway, they are now just making some pseudo bureaucracy to give the impression of legality to the wider public. The next sentence is, on denial from the member state, cancel the Dublin procedure, don't issue an objection, and that word is quite interesting, a remonstration decision within the national procedure. The word remonstration is quite interesting because it indicates that this is encouragement to break the law. Remonstration means that a desk clerk in a state authority is normally asked to point out the breach of a regulation or a law breaking to their superiorities, to their authorities, whenever they see it. When they have done it twice, they are no longer liable for whatever legal procedure follows. So when they see something, they are asked to say twice, at least twice, to their superiors that something is going on, and after that they are no longer liable. Here they are asked specifically not to speak of any potential law breaking. That makes them personally responsible for it. You need that for a coup d'etat. You need to make people feel guilty. I think this is also why the left is so much more concerned about illegal immigration than about legal immigration, because if you are part of the law breaking, you are susceptible to blackmail. You won't point out the transgressions by from other people. You are in it. And I think that is what Angela Merkel did 2015 and probably some time before that. She made everybody guilty a little bit. Everybody, and this is also going on in America, everybody who gets in touch with illegal immigrants, and that's almost everybody. Everybody who comes in touch with illegal immigrants will become illegal himself in one way or another. He or she will hire them without the demanded insurances. That doesn't exist in America, but here it would. They don't pay the taxes because cheap labor and so on and so on. Everybody's in it. Everybody is breaking the law, and therefore everybody is ashamed to point the fingers at the big fish who make the big trouble. That's what you need. If you want to turn the entire state upside down, you have to make you have to make everybody feel so guilty that they will not speak about the big elephant in the room. So everybody in this BAMF Department for Immigration is in one way or another guilty, and legally guilty probably. Because he has not spoken out about some irregularities in one way or another. This illegality is decreased, with which the takeover is eased. The next line says the Dublin documentation is prepared, but not yet sent. So in this case, we have already made a request, or we have already prepared a request, and I have later a different translation for the documentation. Keep in mind that, okay, you have a letter that signals already that you wish to send somebody else away to that different state, and you have to revoke that again later, right? So now the documentation is already prepared, but it has not yet been sent out. How are you to react? Don't send. Cancel Dublin procedure. Cancel interim procedures. Let deadline pass. Then open national procedure. So if the Dublin message of intent is already sent and no court case is started, that means no immigrant has opened a lawsuit against the department against being deported to another country within that Schengen zone area. And the deportation is in itself feasible. You have to react with cancellation of the Dublin procedure, revoke the message of intent, let deportation deadline pass, and the decision within the national procedure has to go forward. The next row reads ongoing court case at the administrative court. That's the Verwaltungsgericht, the administrative court. What are you going to do? So you have to react with an offer of a settlement to the administrative court, revoke the Dublin message of intent, the right to take an asylum case national will be used, the member state will be informed. Costs will be matched and written off. So the asylum seeker is gets his court case basically settled in his favor, and the taxpayer money is probably taking the cost. Goes on with pay attention to the procedure number 1. The message of intent of date and brackets number will be revoked, of course. This is, by the way, this is what you have to tell the court and the applicant who has made a court case in order to stop you from deporting him. So the defendant agrees to a national procedure. That's what you can expect. That was number 2. And number 3 is the costs of the court cases, also over 2 levels of jurisdiction. That means the appeals are matched and written off. So this is what was already mentioned before, but this is again in 3 steps what you have to propose to the court and also to the asylum seeker and his lawyer. And then they follow with a kind of preparation for documentation as to how to close the entire paperwork. And it reads, I feel bound to the settlement offer until and a given date. I hereby sign up to the gate closure declaration when the opposing party, that is in this case the asylum seeker, presents it. So all they want is that the asylum seeker says, I will no longer sue you. You are opening the national asylum procedure anyway. We win. For us, that means the entire topic is off the table. The last row reads, deportation order is executable. Transfer was started in MD6 or 411. And I must say that I have no idea what MD6 or 411 is, so that's not illuminating. But it says cancel Dublin process, assume the right to handle asylum cases immediately, cancellation of deportation. So the last line doesn't really tell me much, but I think you have an overview already. How this was handled. The workers at the departments have been told to actually break the law, and everybody was made guilty. And I think all coup d'etats work that way, that all dogs get thrown a bone for this office, for the Department for Immigration and Asylum. It means that they have a stable job. There will be a lot of work now for them, and they will expand. So that means more power for the leaders in that office, and everybody is thrown a bone. And you also see that in other areas, the churches are making big money out of the poverty that comes with it. The NGOs get a lot of donations, and so on and so on. There are a lot of people who benefited from it. Angela Merkel was smart enough to throw a bone in all corners of the country immediately at once, so that everybody had something to nag on, and not realizing that they are actually destroying the democracy along the way. And also they are all made to feel guilty about it, because they are all susceptible to blackmail in one way or another. Their behavior is either illegal or at least immoral, and they know it. So it's really hard for them to point the fingers at each other, because they all had done something wrong at that time, and they have to gloss over it and pretend that they have been in this humanism, nice, cuddly, fuzzy feeling at the time, and that they really just wanted to help. And in reality, they all benefited from it. They all saw opportunities to gain power. That's what really happened. So that was the 20th of August. Long before this supposed official opening of the borders happened. On the 25th of August, the BAMF tweeted out the Dublin procedure for Syrian citizens is currently de facto suspended. More than a week before the wave of immigrants made it from the train station in Budapest to Germany. They tweeted that out at 1:30 p.m. Later that same day, the newspaper Tagesspiegel, which belongs to Holzbrink, has written an entire article. Germany suspends Dublin rules for Syrian refugees. So you have here all this evidence. Long before this official opening of the borders happened, they have already changed the entire system, and they pretend that they were surprised later and that they acted in an emergency situation that clearly did not exist. There was no emergency situation. Syria is also, by the way, not the first war. So what was actually going on was a coup d'etat. Angela Merkel just found a way to throw the bones at key decision makers that would in a short term benefit all of them, and at the same time they would be incriminated so much that they could no longer point at each other and say, well, something we've done is wrong, we must take some consequences and stop doing this in future. That's what happened. Thank you for listening. Bye.